pastel de nata,
churros,
brigadeiro,
calzone,
apple pie, 水煮肉片
bangers and mash, toad in the hole.
paella.
Welcome back for another amazing episode of Turning Chickens and Breaking Dishes. My name is Davide G. Martins, and I'm the executive chef for the European Union Embassy in Washington, D.C. And if this is your first time listening, let me explain to you why my podcast has this name. I'm originally from Portugal, and I've been living in Washington, D.C. for the last 9 years. And the name of the podcast refers to two Portuguese phrases. Turning chickens means someone that has a lot of experience, and breaking dishes means someone that has exceeded all expectations. I'll be asking my guests if they've been turning more chickens or breaking more dishes. Every episode I'll have a guest and we'll talk about everything related to food, not necessarily ingredients or dishes, but how through food we can help communities, the success of small business owners, the fascinating stories that we remember growing up with our family sitting around a table, and even which ingredients are overrated and underrated and much more. Don't forget to subscribe to my podcast on all the platforms you have access to. Follow me on Instagram at Turning Chickens Breaking Dishes and follow the Facebook page Turning Chickens and Breaking Dishes. If you want to support this podcast, go to anchor.fm/David-Martins. Also, I want to mention that some interviews were recorded in a different microphone, so sometimes if the interview has a different audio, that's the reason. I hope you enjoy listening to every episode, and don't forget I'm Portuguese, so if something doesn't sound exactly right, just smile and pretend that you understand. My guest today is a food writer, food historian, professional cook, cookbook club host, recipe developer, podcast host. She has contributed to the Daily Telegraph, The Independent, and the Country Life magazine, and she's a judge at the 2020 British Charcuterie Awards. She was the winner of the Jane Gregson Trust Award 2018, the Fortnum and Mason Food and Drinks Awards, and Guild of Food Writers Awards, all of this for her cookbook, The Vinegar Cupboard, Recipes and History of an Everyday Ingredient. My guest believes that every dish, or almost, should have a dash of vinegar. Angela Clutton, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. And not so much of the almost, everything.
Everything, absolutely everything. How are you doing today?
I'm really good, thank you.
Two important questions. Have you ever been to Portugal?
I have been to Portugal. I had a really, really horrible holiday in Portugal.
Well,
because I'm so sorry, it poured down the entire time. And we went in the middle of summer and all the locals were saying, this is like a bad November. I can't believe how unlucky you are. So I didn't catch Portugal at its best.
So thank you very much for coming, Angela. This was absolutely pleasure. Do you know
Yeah, exactly. We're done.
We're done. Do you know any Portuguese words?
I don't. So you can say anything you like.
It's okay. It's fine. We'll start with your food historian part. Kind of like more broad, big question, I guess. How important is for us to understand the evolution of an ingredient until our modern days?
I think I would say this, but I think we all who work in food, I think, recognise that we all come from somewhere in terms of our food work. Very few people are, inventing something. It all is born of a food legacy. And I always say, the interesting thing for me about food is that in the past, it tells you, and present actually, food tells you so much about people, place and time. And it does so authentically. And I think that it's such a great insight into different cultures, different ages, different peoples, different class systems. You can see through food how the wealthy are eating, how those who are struggling for eating. You can see it, how impact of wars. It can tell you so much. And that for me is the interesting bit about food history.
Is there any example of a common vegetable or ingredient, a spice, that has a fascinating story for you throughout the years?
This is going to sound like she would say this, but vinegar, really. And that's why I wrote the Vinegar Cupboard. That's why I got so interested in vinegar, because, joking when we began about using vinegar in everything. And that is true. And as a cook, and if you as well, I'm sure you think acidity is really important in terms of balancing dishes. But for me, the thing that really kind of got me so immersed in the world of vinegar was its history and what it tells you about people, place and time. Different vinegars are different all over the world. Sherry vinegar tells you something wonderful about Andalusia. Rice vinegars can tell you so much about the regionality of China and Japan. The same is true all over. Cider vinegar in the States, wine vinegar in France. It tells you so much. And so for me, vinegar, I think, is a really good example of why I find food history so interesting.
In your research for your book, what was the most fascinating detail about vinegar that you didn't know?
I think the whole thing about rice vinegar kind of blew my mind initially, because I could kind of, when I started, you think, you get an apple, you have apple juice, you can kind of get your head around that apple juice liquid becoming vinegar. Rice is a solid. How that becomes vinegar initially kind of blew my mind a bit. So I think that was the thing that was a real voyage of discovery for me.
For people listening, can you describe a little bit the process for rice vinegar, for just in case?
Yes, it's solid state fermentation. So it's very similar in lots of ways in terms of having the yeast and the bacteria for fermentation. But what happens is that then it becomes sort of sticky, and then it kind of gets liquid added to it to kind of draw out the vinegar from the fermented rice. That wasn't very good. It's better in the book.
No. Well, that's why people have to buy the book. And in your book, so how did it start? It was just really to explain to people how important vinegar is, or you were just fascinated by vinegar, or there's something else?
I think it's so underestimated. Certainly in the UK, I would say.
I think it's everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it?
Even if it's not vinegar, I'm sorry. If it's not vinegar, it's lemon or lime. The people always try to add some sort of something at the very end, right?
And it's that thing about they all give acidity, which is brilliant. And so important. I do always think that people reach for salt as being a balancer when they're cooking, and indeed salt is so important, obviously, but I think acidity is a thing which often get missed. So there's a little bit of that, but also I think people just don't really understand partly the cultural associations with it, which are a large part of what interests me, but also the different flavour potential that comes with the different styles. We all know balsamic and we all know cider vinegar. They're probably two of the most popular, and they're both vinegars, but also just so different. And so then you just sort of take that and keep expanding that idea about how different the vinegars can be. And so I just thought that it would be interesting to try and take something which is so ordinary and try and show how extraordinary it can be.
Did you have to travel a lot for your research?
I was lucky enough to do quite a bit. I went to Modena, which I think is probably a bit of a prerequisite if you think on vinegar, and I was very lucky in my hosts because they were very open about some of the complexities around balsamic vinegar, and it is for a purchaser, buying balsamic can be a bit of a minefield, and I think some of the producers are aware of that. So it was very interesting to talk to them. I went up to Orkney. Do you know where Orkney is?
No.
So Orkney is a tiny island at the top of Scotland, and it is completely beautiful, absolutely divine, and very rustic and very wild, and sort of all the things you imagine a kind of remote Scottish island to be. And there's some people up there called Orkney Craft Vinegar, and they do malt vinegar. And in the UK, malt vinegar is massive. Sarson's is the one which everyone has in their kitchen cupboard. And malt vinegar is sort of our traditional vinegar. And so I wanted to go and see them and see somebody who was making a real, I tend not to love the word artisan, but it's really applicable here, a real artisan malt vinegar. So I went up to Orkney. Yes, I was, I went around about quite a bit to kind of get some ideas of people's stories. I mean, I wasn't able to get everywhere, but I was lucky enough to be able to kind of meet quite a lot of vinegar makers.
What makes a good vinegar great vinegar?
I think it's about layers of flavour. If you're using sherry vinegar as my desert island vinegar, if I could have one vinegar for the rest of time, it would be
for breakfast, for lunch. Yes.
yeah. Maybe not on the cornflakes. It has a wonderful depth and real layers within it in terms of its colour and its flavour character and its smell. And I think that is what you're looking for in a really interesting vinegar. I have to say also though that what I consider baseline supermarket vinegars are completely fine for loads of things, but if you're wanting to use a vinegar more as a kind of finishing touch element, then you can go for something that has real kind of layers. I keep saying the word layers, but has more layers within it, then you really notice the difference. But when you're wanting just acidity, you can go for something which is just flatter, and it will do a perfectly decent job.
Do you think vinegar, it's a little bit like olive oil? Sometimes it's worth it to spend a few more pounds, since you're in England, or dollars, and you do get that quality?
Yeah, I think that's right. I do think that's right. I think that so much of vinegar is, in terms of the production, it's about time, and time is money and all of that. So if a vinegar has been made in quite a traditional way, that takes a long time. If it's been aged, obviously that's more time, and so all of that contributes to the price being higher. A real baseline, I keep saying supermarket vinegar, but I think we all know the kind of thing we mean. They are made really fast in an acetator machine, so obviously you don't have the time for the flavours to develop. But it's quicker and therefore it's cheaper. So it's a bit of a broad brushstroke to say, as it is with anything, because people can play fast and loose with the principle, I suppose. Broadly speaking, I think you do get what you pay for.
The evolution in the last 20 years for you of British food?
Yes. Well, I think I think British food has a bit of a bad rap internationally, and certainly used to. And I think we're getting better. We're very good culinary sponges, I think. We liked taking in or being influenced by the cuisines of other cultures. The Ottolenghi, world of food is huge over here now, and has been probably, for the last decade. And that's an influence which is quite new, I think. Claude Erosion was doing that kind of thing, earlier, but it didn't really take off, until the last decade. So I think that we have started to look even more at cultural influences of people who are who come into the UK and bringing their food ideas, and we're very good at, I hope we're very good at kind of embracing that, kind of enjoy it. I also think we have got much better at valuing provenance of produce and being more aware. I think this is probably true in lots of different countries, being more aware of how our food is made, how animals are looked after, how it's grown, and all of that. And so the quality of the baseline produce, I think, is much better. And so I think inevitably then that has an impact on the quality overall of cooking being better. But all of that, unfortunately, has to be massively counterbalanced by the fact that there's a lot of people living in the UK who would listen to my last 2 minutes and say, you're dreaming. We have a food poverty problem over here, which I think is important to recognise as well. And I would unfortunately definitely have to say that has got much worse over the last 10 years. So I think in terms of food, we're quite polarised. Again, this may be something which probably many countries could say the same thing over the last decade or so. But we are unfortunately, in terms of food, I think a bit of a have and have-nots.
What is the best example of food shaping a culture, or a culture shaping their food?
Oh gosh, all of us. I think it's probably really hard to pick. I think we all do. We're all a product of the land. And I think, again, I don't want to keep going on about vinegar, but that's one of the things that really interested me, that France is a wine country. They grow grapes, they make wine, they have wine vinegar. Japan, China, other countries around that region, they have rice vinegar. It's all a product of the land. And so I think one of the wonderful things about food that unites us is that we all have those stories, even if they're very, very different. We can all look back into our heritage and be able to find those things, even if phases certainly in British history, food history, where we weren't exactly covering ourselves with glory food-wise, but those things tell you something also about the politics of the time, or the finances of the time, or that were world wars and all those things. So I think we all do, and I kind of love that.
So even talking about modern day, where do you see food shaping culture, or culture shaping food the most?
For the UK, I would say we are still being very, very influenced by Middle Eastern food, and by an exploration of Middle Eastern culture. And then also we have people like Olia Hercules, who are doing wonderful work about bringing over cuisine which sort of crosses a kind of Asia, Eastern European sort of boundaries of stuff. So I think that we are really pushing to understand more about those cultures. And so often that's done through food.
Which ingredient used to be popular many years ago and today people don't eat it, and vice versa?
I don't know, in the UK you have things like jellied eels, which are, do you know what a jellied eel is?
I have no idea, Angela.
Okay, well, you know what an eel is, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. So jellied eels is one of those real London wartime things, which, grandmothers who were growing up in East End in London would like have jellied eels for breakfast, and it's sort of an eel in aspic, really, and exactly as delicious or not as that sounds. Things like that are really kind of not exactly making a comeback yet. I guess they might, but
let's hope not. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I know, but some of that kind of wartime stuff, I think, for us is still kind of looked at in a kind of, we're not very ready to go back to it yet.
How much more limited a diet was before globalization?
Yeah, I mean, hugely so, but also, well, hugely so in terms of you relying on what you had, and as I was saying earlier about it's all being a product of the land, and so that's what you ate, what you grew, in very broad terms, and so with globalization, obviously, you're then able to kind of import and export as well, and so that changes things up. I think there's a problem sometimes with exporting that we don't. So mackerel is a really interesting example. I think that we have so much mackerel around the waters in the UK, but most of it is exported. Whereas in times gone by, obviously that mackerel would have been like gold down the coast as the seasons changed, and those mackerel were swimming down at different points in the year. The different regions would have been desperate to have their mackerel haul come in. So globalization, has changed what comes in, but also has changed what goes out.
Does your knowledge as a food historian influence the way you judge, for example, at the British Charcuterie Awards?
Yeah, well, I haven't done it yet.
Okay.
So I'm sure it will, in that charcuterie is not something which the Brits classically have done. We do some cured meats and things, but not really in a charcuterie sense that we all think of it. So I think that's something which has really kind of burgeoned through in the last few years. There's been some producers who have really kind of been coming up with some great stuff. I think it's good to have an awareness of where these things come from and the global and historical context, but also I think you got to do that and balance it up with modern tastes and modern origins and modern palates, and not be too, in terms of the charcuterie stuff, people aren't trying to emulate something, not trying to copy something, they're trying to do something distinctive. I think it's good to have the context, but also look at it in its own right as well.
So shifting the conversation a little bit, what was your first memory of taste?
That's a really hard one, isn't it? My first memory of food is watching my mum make chocolate chip cookies. I'm the youngest in the family, and so I remember being in the kitchen while we were making cookies for my two sisters when they came home from school. I don't remember what they tasted like, so maybe my sisters snaffled them, but I certainly remember being in the kitchen making them. I don't know, I can't think what my first taste would have been. It's all those things like ice cream, and actually thinking about it, my associations are not so much to do with taste, more to do with emotional connections. Thinking of things like having ice cream in a cone and the ice cream falling out and being completely devastated. And then my mum taking me back to get another one, even though it was my complete fault for not being careful enough with it. And so it's sort of stories like that, I think, are the things that I think of my very early food experience. Being ill and having particular foods that just make you feel that little bit better. It's more that than actual taste.
I probably know the answer for this next question, but I'm going to ask you to give probably a different answer. But what's the most underrated ingredient? Because I'm sure you're going to say vinegar.
Yeah, I probably would. Underrated. I'm going to go for butter. I think butter is a little bit like vinegar in a sense, in that people think, oh, it's just butter, and not really maybe taking enough time to think about how has it been made, what is the quality of the base ingredients that have gone into it, and again, very much about history and legacy and all those things. And so I feel that butter probably is still slightly underrated.
I go through so much butter in my house that sometimes I don't know. Maybe I'm washing my hair with butter because I buy sticks and sticks of butter and they're just gone. But that's why French cuisine is so good, because there's just a lot of butter.
Well, I think that's a very positive sign, David.
Yeah.
I think that's good. And it drives me nuts when people buy what I call the fake fats. And have those on the taste. My sister does it. I think she does it just to drive me nuts. because I can't bear it. But it's I just think I wish people understood more about real fats and fake fats.
The most overrated ingredient.
Overrated. Oh, that's very, very tough. Well, again, I hate to bring it back to vinegar again, but I'm going to say balsamic, because I think there's a huge misunderstanding about what different balsamic vinegar is. Obviously, if you read the vinegar cupboard, you won't have any misunderstanding at all. But I think broadly speaking, there is a large misunderstanding about the word balsamic, and just that having the word immediately transfers something which is luxurious and delicious, and it doesn't. Some of them are terrible. So I think maybe I'm saying more misunderstood, but I think overrated, and think that we certainly had a period over here where chefs would put it on everything on the menu in the hope that added some sort of luster to it. I think we're happily beyond that a little bit, but I think balsamic for me.
The best breakfast you can have.
Best breakfast. Really good, but not sourdough toast with some scrambled eggs.
What's the strangest combination food-wise people might do it that you just cannot accept?
Oh, these are hard questions, David.
Well, I try my best. Thank you, Angela.
What can't I accept? I don't go for Marmite, so anything with Marmite probably wouldn't really do it for me.
I've shared here before, but I'm going to share with you a few answers that people eat it, and I was very shocked by the answer. One was a coleslaw sandwich. Just a coleslaw, as you do on a Friday afternoon. Popcorn and tomato soup.
No, that's just weird.
Yeah, but this one might be also slightly weird, which is a banana and mayo sandwich.
Oh, okay. Well, then you've hit on something which I can't bear. Bananas are my complete no-go area. And mayonnaise, assuming it's store-bought mayonnaise, which is also my complete no-go. Homemade mayonnaise, I could have that on a sandwich on its own and be perfectly happy. But bananas in store-bought mayonnaise would be my absolute idea of torture.
The podcast name is Turning Chickens and Breaking Dishes. That's two Portuguese phrases. Turning chickens means someone that has a lot of experience, and breaking dishes means someone that exceeded expectations. Do you think you've been turning more chickens or breaking more dishes?
I don't know, really. I guess what we all want to think about ourselves is a bit of both. Strike a balance in between. I don't know.
Yeah, that's good. So this is the part I tell my guests to sell their fish. In Portugal, means that people talk about themselves a little bit. So where people can find you, where people can find the book, what's next for you?
Sell my fish.
Just sell your fish.
I have had the most glorious run at the award season over in the UK for food books. And I won at the Fortnum Mason Awards, and I won two at the Guild Food Writers Awards, and was shortlisted for the André Simon. So I'm very proud of the Vinegar Cupboard, and it's available on Amazon and all usual book outlets. I am doing quite a lot. I do quite a lot of work with Borough Market, which I'm sure you're familiar with. It's London's premier food market, and we are doing a range of digital talks into kind of food and food culture, and we're doing those as a podcast. So if you go to usual podcast places, Spotify, what have you, you can find the Borough Talks under Borough Market there. And I'm trying to kind of get my head into what my next book might be. I've been covered with my first book, and so interesting for me to kind of take in this time and be really trying to think what my next book might be. But at the moment, I'm still very much enjoying the success of the Vinegar Cupboard.
Angela, this was a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming in. I hope nothing but the best for you. So thank you very much.
Thanks ever so much.
Thank you very much for listening to the episode. I want to thank all of you for the comments and reviews, and for those that haven't done that, don't forget to subscribe, rate, leave a review, please. Tell your friends all about the chickens we are turning and the dishes we are breaking. In the next episodes, I will start a new feature called the Embassy Chef's Corner. So if you want to leave me a question or a comment, you can find me on Instagram at Turning Chickens Breaking Dishes, on the Facebook page Turning Chickens and Breaking Dishes. You can also send me an email to the longest email ever created, which is info@turningchickensandbreakingdishes.com. If you want to support this podcast, go to anchor.fm/David-Martins. See you next time. Adeus.